Okay.
Okay, hello everyone. Um, Welcome to this 43rd webinar on the Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. This webinar series is available on Makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation webinars and then webinar series in progress as shown here. Previous episodes of this, the Secret Doctrine, and the Treatise on Cosmic Fire series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar you wish to view. You can register, no, not you can register for these. You can join any of these webinars on moriafederation.com. Here on the upper left, click on any of those and you can join in. The whole process of registration has been suspended. It's now just a direct link to join. Okay, during our last session, we discussed the Sphinx as a possible hidden gateway to the pyramid, theories about how it may have been vandalized, and the possible meanings of its hermaphroditic qualities, its male-female qualities. We then turned our attention to a new section called the Pyramid Mysteries, where we considered the meaning of the name pyramid, fire in the middle, its connection to the tetractys, and other of its mathematical properties. Most notably that the dimensions of the pyramid allow for what's called a squaring of the circle. I've talked about this many times in different webinars, which suggests a balance of spirit and personality, suggesting a soul-infused personality. Then we took a look at its symbolic relationship to other important temples, to the cardinal directions, the zodiac, and the tree of life. Finally, we considered the possible meaning of the three main chambers and its capstone. And this takes us to where we left off last time. So let's start by rereading this passage and then we'll move into the commentary. Can we get a reader, please?
W. Marsham Adams calls the Great Pyramid the house of the hidden places. Such indeed it was, for it represented the inner sanctuary of pre-Egyptian wisdom. By the Egyptians, the Great Pyramid was associated with Hermes, the god of wisdom and letters, and the divine illuminator worshipped through the planet Mercury. Relating Hermes to the pyramid emphasizes anew the fact that it was in reality the supreme temple of the invisible and supreme deity. The Great Pyramid was not a lighthouse, an observatory, or a tomb, but the first temple of the mysteries, the first structure erected as a repository for those secret truths which are the certain foundation of all arts and sciences. It was the perfect emblem of the microcosm and the macrocosm, and, according to the secret teachings, the tomb of Osiris, the black god of the Nile. Osiris represents a certain manifestation of solar energy, and therefore his house or tomb is emblematic of the universe within which he is entombed and upon the cross of which he is crucified.
Okay, so we discussed the first part of this paragraph, and so we'll pick up where we left off with it was the perfect emblem, it being the Great Pyramid, of the microcosm and the macrocosm. So the Great Pyramid is the ultimate creation of a mathematically precise symbol of the central sacred mountain, made with the conscious intention of connecting humanity to the macrocosm. And yet it is also a model of the human archetype, revealing through its number, shape, and geometry the principles of the human constitution. Next, and according to the secret teachings, the tomb of Osiris, the black god of the Nile. Reenactment of the death of Osiris by Egyptian acolytes was very possibly, I would even say likely, part of the initiation ceremonies that took place at the Great Pyramid. Of course, we have no record whatsoever of what went on in those distant days. But it's, especially given the fact that there is the sarcophagus in the king's chamber, I think it's very possible that that the death of Osiris was reenacted. The black of Osiris is not the black of the underworld. This is not the black of evil, but rather the noumenal darkness that stands as the source of all light. Can we get a reader for this little section?
Karen, can you read that for us, please?
Osiris is the black god. These were the words pronounced at low breath at initiation in Egypt, because Osiris Numenon is darkness to the mortal. In this chaos were formed the waters, Mother Isis, Aditi, etc. They are the waters of life in which primordial germs are created, or rather reawakened, by the primordial light.
Thank you. Okay. And then finally, in this passage, we have Osiris represents a certain manifestation of solar energy, and therefore his house or tomb is emblematic of the universe within which he is entombed, and upon the cross of which he is crucified. The specific aspect of solar energy that Osiris embodies is the vitalization of the world of form, solar vitalization of the world of form, symbolized by a sarcophagus fashioned to his exact measurements, and which he was tricked into entering by his arch nemesis Seth, a personification of the form aspect. Could we get a reader, please?
And Veronica, can you read that for us, please? Okay, I don't see her unmuting. How about you, Ann Parker?
Sure, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. As Osiris signified good, Typhon, or rather Seth, was evil, and the remarkable notion of good and evil being brothers is abundantly illustrated with early sculptures. Nor was it till a change was made, apparently by foreigners from Asia, who held the doctrine of the two principles, that evil became confounded with sin, when the brother of Osiris no longer received divine honors. Till then, Sin, the great serpent, or Apophis, the giant, or earthborn, was distinct from Seth, who was a deity and part of the divine system, which recalls these words of Isaiah: I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things.
Thank you, Anne. Okay, so there was a real shift as a result of this creation of the idea of sin as being outside the realm of the divine intention, right? Before that, it was seen very much as we as Theosophists see it, which is that we work to perfect our natures, and we are in error, which is the meaning of the word sin, until we do so, right? And so it's a process of purification and of gradual coming into alignment with, rather than this idea of this intense polarity of heaven and hell, which was introduced after this early Egyptian period. All right. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Michael, can you read that for us, please? Okay, I don't see him unmuting, so Joe, can you read that for us, please?
I am here.
Thank you.
Through the mystic passageways and chambers of the Great Pyramid, past the illumined of antiquity, they entered its portals as men, they came forth as gods. It was a place of the second birth, the womb of the mysteries, and wisdom dwelt in it as God dwells in the hearts of men. Somewhere in the depths of the recesses, there resided an unknown being who was called the Initiator, or the Illustrious One, robed in blue and gold, and bearing in his hand the sevenfold key of eternity. This was the lion-faced Hierophant, the Holy One, the Master of Masters, who never left the house of wisdom, and whom no man ever saw, save he who had passed through the gates of preparation and purification. It was in these chambers that Plato, he of the broad brow, came face to face with the wisdom of the ages, personified in the master of the hidden house.
Thank you, Joe. So let's finish the narrative. A reader, please.
Vivian, can you read that for us, please?
Who was the master dwelling in the mighty pyramid, the many rooms of which signified the worlds in space? The master whom none might behold, save those who had been born again. He alone fully knew the secret of the pyramid, but he has departed the way of the wise, and the house is empty. The hymns of praise no longer echo in muffled tones through the chambers. The neophyte no longer passes through the elements and wanders among the 7 stars. The candidate no longer receives the word of life from the lips of the Eternal One. Nothing now remains that the eye of man can see but an empty shell, the outer symbol of an inner truth, and men call the house of God a tomb.
Of course, none of this is historically or archaeologically substantiated, but many theosophical sources concur that the Great Pyramid was used for initiation. Let's take a look at an equally fanciful, but nonetheless possible scenario from the secret societies of all ages and countries. This describes the initiation process. Can we get a reader?
Yes. Eleonora, can you read that for us, please?
In Egypt and other countries, India, Media, Persia, and Mexico, the place of initiation was a pyramid erected over subterranean caverns. The pyramids, in fact, may be looked upon, considering their size, shape, and solidity, as artificial mountains. Their form not only symbolically represented the ascending flame, but also had a deeper origin in the conical form, which is the primitive figure of all natural products. And the Great Pyramid, the tomb of Osiris, was erected in such a position and to such a height that at the spring and autumnal equinoxes, the sun would appear exactly at midday upon the summit of the pyramid, seeming to rest upon this immense pedestal, when his worshippers extended at the base would contemplate the great Osiris as well when he descended into the tomb as when he arose from it triumphant. The candidate, conducted by a guide, was led to a deep, dark well or shaft in the pyramid, and provided with a torch, he descended into it by means of a ladder affixed to the side. Arrived at the bottom, he saw two doors, one of them barred, the other yielding to the touch of his hand. Passing through it, he beheld a winding gallery, whisking the door behind him shut with a clang that reverberated through the vaults. Inscriptions like the following meet his eye. Whoso shall pass along this road alone and without looking back shall be purified by fire, water, and air, and overcoming the fear of death shall issue from the bowels of the earth to the light of the day, preparing his soul to receive the mysteries of Isis. Well, proceeding onward, the candidate arrived at another iron gate guarded by 3 armed men, whose shining helmets were surmounted by emblematic animals. The Cerberus of Ephesus. Here, the candidate had offered to him the last chance of returning, if so inclined. Electing to go forward, he underwent the trial by fire, by passing through a hall filled with inflammable substances in a state of combustion and forming a bower of fire.
Thank you. And next reader, please.
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. The floor was covered with a grating of red-hot iron bars, leaving, however, narrow interstices, yes, where he might safely place his feet. Having surmounted this obstacle, he has to encounter the trial by water. The wide and dark canal, fed by the waters of the Nile, arrests his progress. Placing the flickering lamp upon his head, he plunges into the canal and swims to the opposite bank, where the greatest trial, that by air, awaits him. He lands upon a platform leading to an ivory door, bounded by 2 walls of brass, into each of which is inserted an immense wheel of the same metal. He in vain attempts to open the door, when, espying 2 large iron rings affixed to it, he takes hold of them. But suddenly the platform sinks from under him. A chilling blast of wind extinguishes his lamp, and the 2 brazen wheels revolve with formidable rapidity and stunning noise, whilst he remains suspended by the 2 rings over the fathomless abyss. But ere he is exhausted, the platform returns. The ivory door opens, and he sees before him a magnificent temple, brilliantly illuminated and filled with the priests of Isis, clothed in the mystic insignia of their offices. The Hierophant, just a second here, at their head. But the ceremonies of initiation do not cease here. Candidate is subjected to a series of fastings, which gradually increase for 9 times 9 days. During this period, a rigorous silence is imposed upon him, which if he preserve inviolate, he is at length fully initiated into the esoteric doctrines of Isis. He is led before the triple statue of Isis, Osiris, and Horus, another symbol of the sun, where he swears never to publish the things revealed to him in the sanctuary, and first drinks the water of Lethe, presented to him by the high priest, to forget all that he ever heard in his unregenerate state, and afterwards the waters of Namazni, to remember all the lessons of the wisdom imparted to him in the mysteries. He is next introduced to the most secret part of the sacred edifice, where a priest instructs him in the application of the symbols found therein. He is then publicly announced as a person who has been initiated into the mysteries of Isis, the first degree of the Egyptian rites.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, so did this happen exactly as written here? Probably not. Certainly not in the Great Pyramid, where things like receding floors and large brass wheels and stuff don't exist. But this was based on writings of Greek mystery initiations. And so something akin to these would have taken place. The exact details, of course not. But the spirit of the passage, I think, is something that that happened during the pyramid initiations. Any thoughts about this? Any questions? Okay. Next up, reader, please.
Greg, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. I guess I wasn't expecting to, but I'm happy to read it. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Okay. The technique of the mysteries was unfolded by the sage illuminator, the master of the secret house. The power to know his guardian spirit was revealed to the new initiate. The method of disentangling his material body from his divine vehicle was explained, and to consummate the magnum opus, there was revealed the divine name, the secret and unutterable designation of the supreme deity, by the very knowledge of which man and his God are made consciously one. With the giving of the name, the new initiate became himself a pyramid, within the chambers of whose soul numberless other human beings might also receive spiritual enlightenment.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, so though historically unsubstantiated in reference to the ancient Egyptians, this passage does follow the general outlines of an initiatory system. Many of the elements found here can be traced to initiations that have been written about, at least from a general perspective. For instance, there would certainly have been a quote unquote master of the secret house, such as Hermes or one of his spiritual descendants associated with the Great Pyramid. But we don't know. We have no record of such an initiator because there never would have been a record kept. This would have been part of the secrets of initiation. The quote, method of disentangling his material body from his divine vehicle, is a novel but not inaccurate way of describing the initiatory process of re-identifying with the subtle body. And DK describes the progressive unveiling of the true name of Sanat Kumara as a disciple passes from one initiation to the next. These sounds are words of power that become part of the initiation ceremony. And then next, with the giving of the name, the new initiate became himself a pyramid, within the chambers of whose soul numberless other human beings might also receive spiritual enlightenment. So here MPH suggests that through identification with the sacred name, an initiate himself, herself becomes a temple for others to receive spiritual enlightenment. I love this passage. I think it's beautifully written. Okay, next up, could we get a reader?
Jerry, can you read that for us, please? Okay, I'm not getting anything there. And Veronica, can you read that? for us, please? Oh, there's
Um,
Jerry.
Hi. Does this start in the King's Chamber?
That's
Is that
right.
correct? In the King's Chamber was enacted the drama of the second death. Here the candidate, after being crucified upon the cross of the solstices and equinoxes, was buried in the great coffer. There is a profound mystery to the atmosphere and temperature of the King's Chamber. It is of a peculiar death-like cold which cuts to the marrow of the bone. This room was a doorway between the material world and the transcendental spheres of nature. While his body lay in the coffer, the soul of the neophyte soared as a human-headed hawk through the celestial realms, there to discover firsthand the eternity of life, light, and truth, as well as the illusion of death, darkness, and sin. Thus, in one sense, the Great Pyramid may be likened to a gate through which the ancient priests permitted a few to pass toward the attainment of individual completion. It is also to be noted, incidentally, that if the coffer in the King's Chamber be struck, the sound emitted has no counterpart in any known musical scale. This tonal value may have formed part of that combination of circumstances which rendered the King's Chamber an ideal setting for the conferment of the highest degree of the mysteries.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay, so this, I think, is a little closer to home in terms of strip away the fantasy aspect. And I think what is written here is very likely accurate. So first up, in the King's Chamber was enacted the drama of the second death. Here, the candidate, after being crucified upon the cross of the solstices and the equinox, was buried in the great coffer. Okay, the cross of the solstices and the equinoxes is the cardinal cross. The idea of a second death was a big part of the greater Eleusinian mysteries and was similar in many ways to the concept as presented by DK. So let's take a look at both the Eleusinian tradition and what DK gives us. Can we get a reader, please?
And Veronica, can you read that for us, please? Nope, she's not unmuting. Let's see. Kira, can you read that for us, please?
But after a certain time, the block higher mind aspires to reascend to its fountainhead, the sun, whereupon the Persephone, with her colleague, the celestial Hermes, separates it with gentleness and by slow degrees from the grosser, lower psyche. This is the second death, the vows flying up to the sun, with the remaining in the moon in a dreamy sort of existence until gradually absorbed into her substance, exactly as the earth gradually absorbs into herself the remains of the body. Calm and philosophic souls are easily absorbed, but active, passionate, erotic natures with great difficulty, they wander about in mid-space, divested by the block,
No,
becoming,
it's new.
what is it?
It's new. It's Greek, yeah.
Okay,
Nous.
nous, becoming typhoons or typhonies, throwing confusion into oracles, as the so-called typhon does at Delphi, until the end, like they likewise are drawn back and attracted into the substance of the moon.
Yeah, I should have warned you about the Greek. The only term I know for sure is the nous, which is higher mind,
Noose.
the higher aspect of the soul. I'm not sure what this term is. If Anne Veronica was present, she could let us know, but it represents the lower psyche. Okay, and so now we have the DK version of the second death. Can we get a reader, please?
Anne Veronica is here. She just hasn't unmuted when I've asked her to, so maybe she's stepped away. Okay. Kirsten, can you read that for us, please? I see you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Do you have a mute?
Sorry,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
There you go.
When the disciple has gained the fruit of experience, which is knowledge, and is learning to transmute it into wisdom, when his objective is to live truly and in reality, and when the will to good is the crowning goal of his daily life, then he can begin to work the will. This will make the link between the lower and the higher minds, between spirit and matter, and between monad and personality, a definite and existent fact. Duality then supervenes upon triplicity and the potency of the central nucleus in the egoic vehicle destroys at the fourth initiation the three surrounding expressions. They disappear, and then the so-called destruction of the causal body has taken place. This is the true second death, death to form altogether.
Thank you. Okay.
Greg has his hand up.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
So when we talk about the second death, are we thinking more, is this like the second initiation? No, this would be the third, right? Or
Fourth.
even the fourth. Yeah, okay, it'd be the fourth. Okay, I was just inclined to clarify that because,
Yeah.
okay.
It's the death to the need to reincarnate. Hindus call it breaking the chains of samsara, which means that you're no longer compelled to reincarnate. And you literally have shifted your center to the soul-infused personality that is comes into wakefulness on the lower levels of the Buddhic plane, and you're released from the three lower expressions altogether. Okay. So next, there's a profound mystery to the atmosphere and temperature of the king's chamber. It is of a peculiar death-like cold, which cuts to the marrow of the bone. This room was a doorway between the material world and the transcendental spheres of nature. While his body lay in the coffer, the soul of the neophyte soared as a human-headed hawk through the celestial realms, there to discover firsthand the eternity of life, light, and truth, as well as the illusion of death, darkness, and sin. So the heat generated by the constant tourist traffic in the Great Pyramid has removed the quote-unquote death-like cold. Also, the sarcophagus itself has been moved from its original position, rendering it out of alignment with whatever invisible forces it was originally meant to align with in ancient times. Nonetheless, at least for me, laying in that red granite pyramid, the sarcophagus, was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I have no doubt that when properly prepared and under the guidance of a temple priest, the sarcophagus, amplified by the dimensions of the king's chamber itself, would have been a penultimate vehicle for initiation, possibly reenacting the death and resurrection of Osiris. Next. Thus, in one sense, the Great Pyramid may be likened to a gate through which the ancient priests permitted a few to pass toward the attainment of individual completion. It seems likely that with the extraordinary effort it took to create the mathematically precise Great Pyramid, that it was an unparalleled magical device for transporting the prepared acolytes across some spiritual threshold. And finally, it is also to be noted, incidentally, that if the coffer in the king's chamber be struck, the sound emitted has no counterpart in any known musical scale. This tonal value may have formed part of that combination of circumstances which rendered the king's chamber an ideal setting for the conferment of the highest degrees of the mysteries. I didn't myself strike this coffer, but as I mentioned before, I sounded an ohm from within it as I was laying in the coffer, at which time, much to my surprise, the sarcophagus resonated with a tone which was at least as loud as the ohm I was sounding. And it only makes sense that this was a method of literally attuning to and thus aligning with whatever initiatory purpose substandard these ceremonies inside the Great Pyramid. By the way, anytime you have any thoughts or questions, just raise your hand.
Greg says this seems similar to what I felt when I went into a sensory deprivation tank, where we sit in total darkness in a saltwater mixture, where we just be present in a sensory deprivation tank.
Right, I agree with you. It's going to have that effect. The only difference would be that this would be a very directed and a well-trod path into initiation in these ancient days. But yes, I've also lain in a sensory deprivation tank, and if you take advantage of it, you can move into a profound state.
Joe has a question. She's got her hand up. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, Joe.
My question relates to Horus and Thoth, and wondering if there's a relationship there because one is a hawk and the other is very close in shape, I think, the head.
To a hawk? Are you talking about Seth or Thoth? Oh, Thoth, you said, not Seth. Yeah. Oh well, gosh,
It's sort of like, is this prehistory to the Thoth stories?
To the which stories?
Thoth. How do you pronounce it?
Thoth.
Thoth.
Oh, I see. No, certainly Thoth, who represents the third principle of mind at all levels, very much connected with Hermes. Hermes and Thoth were interchangeable terms. We've covered that in a couple of webinars talking about Thoth. And they reestablished civilization in Egypt. And so that would have been in early times. And I would think that it's very likely that Thoth overshadowing Hermes would have been the original hierophant of the pyramid.
Thank you.
In terms of Horus, he's very much Egyptian Christ figure. He's the son of Osiris and Isis, And as a result, he's the manifest solar principle, just very much like the Christ was.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay, can we get a reader for this?
The modern world knows little of these ancient rites. The scientist and the theologian alike gaze upon the sacred structure, wondering what functional urge inspired the Herculean labor. If they would but think for a moment, they would realize that there is only one urge in the soul of man capable of supplying the required incentive, namely the desire to know, to understand, and to exchange the narrowness of human mortality for the greater breadth and scope of divine enlightenment. Some say of the Great Pyramid that it is the most perfect building in the world, the source of weights and measures, the original Noah's Ark, the origin of languages, alphabets, and scales of temperature and humidity. Few realize, however, that it is the gateway to the eternal.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, first, the modern world knows little of these ancient rites. Actually, the modern world knows nothing of these ancient rites, though I'm sure they are recorded in the Akashic records and are accessible to those who would have some purpose for viewing them. These aren't lost, but they certainly have been withdrawn from our knowing of them or about them. Next, the scientists, excuse me, just a moment. Next, the scientist and the theologian alike gaze upon this sacred structure, wondering what fundamental urge inspired the Herculean labor, or Herculean. Unfortunately, all but a few archaeologists believe that the Great Pyramid was built as the tomb of the pharaoh Khufu. They don't think any more of it than that. Only a very few, including those who accept the ageless wisdom teachings, believe that the Great Pyramid was a temple of initiation, not a widespread belief at all.
Francis?
Yeah.
Vivian asks, would Osiris and the gods come from elsewhere?
Well, it depends what you mean by elsewhere. You know, are they a part of the human hierarchy, or not human hierarchy, but rather the earth scheme? And, you know, it's a question we just don't know the answer to. They could very well be, you know, extraterrestrial beings who DK tells us, you know, often associate with a hierarchy, right? They're called in, and they may have been that, or they could have been from a previous chain and have developed through the Earth scheme at a much earlier period. You know, it's associating the nomenclature of the modern theosophy and the ancient Egyptians can be challenging in that way, right? Also, another way of looking at them, and I like to hold both of these ideas in mind, is that they are a nexus of intelligent energies, rather than thinking them in terms of entities. You think of them in terms of like nexi or nexuses of forces and energies that impact our world. I saw somebody else's hand go up.
Yes, Greg's hand is up. Go ahead, Greg.
Might we even think of those gods like what Vivian was talking about, almost as if they were most advanced forms of Davidic hierarchy that basically are living but they're more entity in their own sense that they are living, but they might be like Davic in quality. Could we even think of those in that term too, that it's our own archetypal projection that would give them of our understanding of them being as devas or like angels, almost like?
Well, I would see them, if they're entified, as belonging to the sixth kingdom of nature, the kingdom of gods, which would have long ago melded the human and Davic lines of ascent in this higher kingdom, right? So they wouldn't be pure Davic energy, but they would certainly be they would be in touch with and have control over those. You know, Osiris is considered the third aspect of the sun. We'll be getting into this more, you know, which is the vitality aspect, that which vivifies. You know, it suggests the four etheric subplanes of the cosmic physical plane. It's the vivifying aspect of the planet, really. And Isis, more along the line of Mula Prakriti, or pure substance before it diversifies. So in working together, it's a male-female pair that incarnated, quote unquote, that came in to serve humanity together. And so there's a inherent unity of these, the principles of the life force that they represent. You know, one through the substantive aspect, and the other the vivified spirit, vivifying form aspect, right? And of course, that happens through that vivification happens through the Davic kingdom. Anyone else? Okay, where in the heck am I? Oh yeah, if they would but think for a moment, they would realize that there is only one urge in the soul of man capable of supplying the required incentive, namely the desire to know, to understand, and to exchange the narrowness of human mortality for the greater breadth and scope of divine enlightenment. You know, I can't help but think of a 26-year-old Manly P. Hall writing this, right? Because unfortunately, it takes a lot more than, quote, if they would but think for a moment. It takes lifetimes of experience before one even begins to become aware that it's even possible to move from the, quote, narrowness of human mortality towards the greater breadth and scope of divine enlightenment. There seems to be a pretty strong wall between the scientific approach represented by archaeology and the more humanistic and theosophical / philosophical approach to this subject. Next, some men say of the Great Pyramid that it is the most perfect building in the world, the source of weights and measures, the original Noah's Ark, the origin of languages, alphabets, and scales of temperature and humidity. Few realize, however, that it is the gateway to the eternal. So let's just take a minute to consider each of these references. Much of J. Ralston Skinner's The Source of Measures, a stupendous book, is taken up with examples of how the Great Pyramid provides a system of standard measures throughout the world. It was the foundation of creating a system of standard measures. William Sterling's The Canon also attests to the Great Pyramid as a model of pyramidal form for the universe. Could we get a reader for this?
Greg, can you read that, please?
Sure. We shall therefore conclude that it was the object of the builders by this simple geometrical figure to set up an enduring monument, exemplifying by its measures and numbers those canonical laws of Egypt alluded to by Plato, which is supposed were the pattern and source of all our later philosophical and theological systems. It accordingly follows that this remarkable structure is an exact embodiment of the universe, geometrically reduced to a pyramidal form and exhibiting the true aspect of the cosmic system as it appeared and was known to the Egyptians at the time of its foundation.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, the Natural Genesis gives further insight into the connection between the Great Pyramid and Noah's Ark. Could we get a reader?
Aaron, can you read that for us, please?
Murtadi, who wrote in AD 1584 at Tihi in Arabia, relates a story of one King Surit, who dreamed of the coming deluge and built the pyramid to secure the treasures of wisdom. Seret is the Egyptian name for the keeper, the measurer, or the builder. Sarit is also called Seof by Murtadi, that is Khufu, who was the builder, the Cheops of Herodotus. He says further that the Maj, or magician, Seof, made his abode in the maritime pyramid along with Noah. This is a deluge legend indeed, yet it contains matter to make us listen more intelligently to Arab tradition. For Num Khufu, the builder of the Great Pyramid, bore the name of Kamite Noah, or Num, lord of the inundation, whose ark city was Thebes. The name of Num Khufu was only discovered by Colonel Weiss in 1837, scrawled in the quarry marks upon the stones. Yet, says the Arab report, Seruf, for Khufu dwelt with Num in the Great Pyramid as he does in the Cartouche. Of course, Num, or Noah, has been rendered personally by means of the Hebrew tradition. In the Cartouche, it is but a part of the name of him who was the builder of a veritable ark of the deluge of time, or Chronos.
Okay, so the Natural Genesis is always a bit challenging. You have to go over it in order to get full awareness of what he's talking about. But it's one of the most esoteric sources that we have available. Just one thing I'll say about this, which is that exoterically, there is a theory that the pyramid was built to secure treasure, right? Which is absurd if you've ever been in it, since only about 1% of its interior mass is in the shape of a room where stuff could be stored, right? But when we read it in terms of the measurements being a treasure house of wisdom, that is to say, that through its the canon of its numerical and geometrical laws and attributes, that then it could easily be seen as a treasure house that would hold fast through a deluge, and then to carry the mysteries for a future generation. So that's one of the things he talks about here. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Scott, can you read that, please?
Though the modern world may know a million secrets, the ancient world knew one. That one was greater than the million. For the million secrets breed death, disaster, sorrow, selfishness, lust, and avarice. But the one secret confers light, life, light, and truth. The time will come when the secret wisdom shall again be the dominating religious and philosophical urge of the world. The day is at hand when the doom of dogma shall be sounded. The great theological Tower of Babel, with its confusion of tongues, was built of bricks of mud and a mortar of slime. Out of the cold ashes of lifeless creeds, however, shall rise phoenix-like the ancient mysteries. No other institution has so completely satisfied the religious aspirations of humanity. For since the destruction of the mysteries, there never has been a religious code to which Plato could have subscribed. The unfolding of man's spiritual nature is as an exact science as astronomy, medicine, or jurisprudence. To accomplish this end, religions were primarily established, and out of religion have come science, philosophy, and logic as methods whereby this divine purpose might be realized.
Thank you, Scott. This, to my ears, beautifully written passage contrasts both material science and the dogmatic religious approach with the ageless wisdom teaching. So let's go ahead and read the last paragraph of this section. Could we get a reader, please?
Okay, but first, before we do that, Greg has a couple of comments. He says, and this was before we started reading that last passage. He says, but not necessarily a container for actual humans, i.e. the pyramids, so are in a way a sort of dissimilar to the Ark of Noah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The more exoteric version is that in order to avoid the flood, Tuvakain got in this enormous ark and wrote it out. But here the ark is an ark of wisdom carrying the canon of the ageless wisdom that could then be, you could say, reconstituted in a future root race, So it could have been a bridge between the Atlantean canon of ageless wisdom and the Aryan race. Okay, so we're here, I believe, right? Last paragraph.
Vivian, can you read that, please?
The dying god shall rise again. The secret room in the house of the hidden places shall be rediscovered. The pyramid again shall stand as the ideal emblem of solidarity, inspiration, aspiration, resurrection, and regeneration. As the passing sands of time bury civilization upon civilization beneath their weight, the pyramid shall remain as the visible covenant between eternal wisdom and the world. The time may yet come when the chants of the illumined shall be heard once more in its ancient passageways, and the master of the hidden house shall await in the silent place for the coming of that man who, casting aside the fallacies of dogma and tenet, seeks simply truth and will be satisfied with neither substitute nor counterfeit.
I feel like we need some music in the background. Yeah, and so with this inspiring call for a return to the true way, we finished the chapter on the pyramid and the Sphinx and turn the page to a new chapter entitled Isis, the Virgin of the World. So I'd like to start by taking a look at the text here underneath the image at left called the Saitic Isis. Can we get a reader, please?
Dan P., can you read that for us, please?
Sure. I am Isis, mistress of the whole land. I was instructed by Hermes, and with Hermes I invented the writings of the nations, in order that not all should write with the same letters. I gave mankind their laws, and ordained what no one can alter. I am the eldest daughter of Kronos. I am the wife and sister of the high king Osiris. I am she who rises in the dog star. I am she who is called the goddess of women. I am she who separated the heaven from the earth. I have pointed out their paths to the stars. I have invented seamanship. I have brought together men and women. I have ordained that the elders shall be beloved by their children. With my brother Osiris, I made an end of cannibalism. I have instructed mankind in the mysteries. I have taught reverence of the divine statues. I have established the temple precincts. I have overthrown the dominion of the tyrants. I have caused men to love woman. I have made justice more powerful than silver and gold. I have caused truth to be considered beautiful. See Ehrman's Handbook of Egyptian Religion. The face and form of Isis were covered with a veil of scarlet cloth, symbolic of ignorance and emotionalism, which forever stand between man and truth. Isis lifts her veil and discovers herself to the true and wise investigator who unselfishly, humbly, and earnestly seeks to understand the mysteries which surround him in the universe. Those to whom she reveals herself are warned to remain silent concerning the mysteries which they have seen. The great admonition of the wise men was, if thou know it, be silent. To the vulgar and profane, the infidel and disinterested one, she does not uncover her face, for they could not understand the secret processes of the invisible worlds.
Thank you. Okay, some of these statements describe the general civilizing influence of Hermes' teachings, such as, I have ordained the elders shall be beloved by their children. With my brother Osiris, I made an end of cannibalism, and I have overthrown the dominion of the tyrants. But many of her statements, proclaimed by Isis in the first person, refer to specific attributes that the great goddess personified in ancient Egypt, such as, I am Isis, mistress of the whole land. I was instructed by Hermes, and with Hermes, I invented the writings of the nations in order that not all should write with the same letters. So you might remember from the previous chapter that the primordial or first Hermes was overshadowed by Pymander, who proclaimed himself to be the mind of God, and who, through Hermes, is ever depicted as the teacher of Isis and Osiris, who incarnated together for the salvation of humanity. In his Thrice Great Hermes, G.R.S. Mead says, and so Osiris and Isis are born to help the world, to recall men from savagery and restore the moral order. Their mission meets with success, and the world is filled with a knowledge of the path of return. Next, I gave mankind their laws and ordained what no one can alter. Isis is the Egyptian great mother. Thus, the laws ordained, which no one can alter, are the natural laws of the universe. From these, the priests of Isis extrapolated the particular laws of the land, which were then instituted by the pharaoh. Next, I am the eldest daughter of Kronos. Kronos is Saturn, the oldest of the gods. He represented the seventh gate, which leads into and out of the manifested realms. Thus, his daughter Isis personifies those manifest realms, or rather the pristine substance from which they were forged. Next, I am the wife and sister of the High King Osiris. Osiris represents the third aspect of the sun, which vivifies and vitalizes the substantive realm represented by Isis. Isis as wife symbolizes the universality of the masculine-feminine pairs of opposites. Isis's sister represents their co-equal process in designing and creating the manifested world. Next, I am she who rises in the dog star. The Isiacs, or cult of Isis believed that the soul of Isis as Genetrix dwelt in Sothis, the dog star. This aligns DK's teachings with that Sirius is to our solar logos as the soul is to the personality. Next, I am she who is called the goddess of women. Along with Venus, Ishtar, Eve, and Mary, Isis is the personification of the principle, of the feminine principle. Next, I am she who separated the heaven from the earth. Isis personifies Mother Earth. Theosophically, she is the result of the will to be of the Logos. Thus, Annie Besant describes Osiris Isis as the Egyptian personification of the second Logos. Next, I have pointed out their paths to the stars. This statement references the ageless wisdom, another aspect of Isis. Hence HPB's book title, Isis Unveiled. G.R.S. Mead says, this was the famous veil of Isis that no mortal had raised, for that veil was the spiritual vesture of the man himself. And to raise it, he had to transcend the limits of individuality, break the bonds of death, and so become immortal. I see a hand.
Yes, Jerry's got his hand up. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yes, I have two questions about Isis and as this divine feminine deity, and especially this passage where she lowers the veil between the heavens and earth, and I'm wondering if this, what you think about this idea that it may actually be referring to the veil between the physical and higher planes.
That's the first veil, and that's part of her veil. But
Okay.
it's you could say a many layered vestment, right? You remember what was it the dance of was it Sheba? No, who was the one that danced before John the Baptist? And
Salome?
yeah, thank you, Salome. Yeah, who was called the dance of the seven veils. Well, no big surprise there that we have seven planes of the cosmic physical plane, and each of them acts like a veil in terms of one's consciousness. And we've been studying in a treatise on cosmic fire how it's the fourth subplane of each of those that acts as a bridge that opens up the contact with the next subplane. Therefore, when you are able to prevail, so to speak, over the fourth etheric subplane, then astral awareness comes forth, right? The same thing with the fourth subplane of the mental plane is that great veil that allows us to gain Buddhic consciousness. But anyway, the idea of the veils of Isis, I think, very much applies to these subplanes.
Yes.
Help.
Thank you. And the Theosophists, especially Jeffrey Hodson, write about in the spiritual hierarchy that there is a divine feminine, and actually Hodson writes that the Mother Mary is the current holder of the equivalent of a master in the Great White Brotherhood and for the divine feminine. Are you familiar with those thoughts?
I'm not that familiar with Hodson's writings. I've read a bit, and I've really responded to his illustrations. Um, the divine feminine in theosophy is always a purified substance, right? The substantive realm, which ultimately is the pure light of noumenal substance, which is, philosophically what Isis is. And from that is drawn all diversification, right? Now that's personified. And there's, like Apuleius in his golden ass, he actually is, you could say, contacted by or overshadowed. He goes into a deep meditation and contacts Isis, or some personification of this purified form energy. And in that connection, he learns a lot about the nature of the universe, right? So you can see it either as a pure energetic form or as a personification of that pure energy. In this case, the energy of that is noumenal to actual substance. And that's has always been the source of the feminine aspect, with the masculine aspect being the spirit, right? But in terms of like that position and the hierarchy as a master, you have another feminine masculine duality in the Davic and human kingdoms, which progress, you could say, side by side, and together move into masterhood, or that level of mastery, fifth initiation, and then eventually
merge,
synthesize the sixth initiation. You have that, and there's another feminine principle in that. Also, we have the Earth and Venus, the planet Venus, who also represent a masculine and feminine polarity, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. This is such a fascinating topic for me. It's I appreciate your thoughts, and I have 5 other questions, but I'm going to restrain for now.
Well, first of all, feel free, to ask away. This, if they're of interest to you, I'm sure they'd be of interest to other people. So, don't hold back. But thank you for your comments. It's much more interesting to have a dialogue than to have me just, give you a lecture on this material.
Yes.
More.
Well, okay, I'm going to take your invitation.
Okay, go for it.
And the subject of the divine feminine, the great mother, the mother of the world, there's such diversity in views. And the Master DK pretty clearly says there is no personage that we know of as the mother of the world. And yet in Agni Yoga, there are extensive comments and just beautiful writings on the what the Master M is refers to as the mother of the world. And then there's the Theosophists, they Besant and Leadbeater and Hodson, they do seem to view to have the view that there is this being that operates within the planetary hierarchy that is an embodiment of representation of the divine feminine.
Yeah, I actually don't know that DK ever says there is no such being. You know, there is some,
He does. I can give you the reference, actually.
oh, you can, wow. Okay, maybe stick in the chat box. I'd be interested in hearing what he has to say. You know, there is what's called the anima mundi, which is a substantive aspect of the planet, but it's not the planetary entity, which is a what do you call it, an elemental aspect. It is literally the substance all the way up through and including the Akashic level, which is illumined, intelligent, purified substance, you know. So, you know, is there actually an entity? How can we know until you have an experience? But many people have had experiences, you know, have been overshadowed by or have had an experience of a you know, what might be called the divine feminine, you know. I like to think of like the esoteric ruler of Virgo, which is the moon veiling Vulcan. So you have this pure spiritual fire that's animating and purified the substantive realm. And to me, that represents that level or nature of purified substance that is the energetic reality of Isis. But there's much more to her than that, because part of the substantive realm is also higher mind, knowledge and wisdom, the ageless wisdom, as she says here. You know, she's patron of the ageless wisdom. So it's through the substantive realm as lived by humans, as we evolve, that we come to a place where we can link with the higher realities through that endowed gift of mind, right? And she, as the daughter of Hermes, or as schooled by Hermes, I'm sorry, it's daughter of Saturn, but schooled by Hermes, carries that quality. But, you know, there's no way we're going to like figure it out here. But the more we talk about it, maybe the better we can understand her.
Yeah. Yes. And just to say, I really like and appreciate your perspective of universal light substance. I refer to it as universal light substance, as being the source of what's commonly linked to the divine feminine.
Yeah, well, you know, it's not my idea, but it is a theosophical idea. This kind of thing comes out in HPB, perhaps more than DK, you know, because she tends to be more oriented towards personages than DK does. But well, first of all, I really would like to read that reference. So stick it in the chat box if you get a moment.
I will find it and put it in there.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Francis.
Yeah.
I just want to say that Greg has typed a couple of things in the chat box. He says first, wait a minute. They're coming in quicker than I can keep track of them. He put the link in Wikipedia on Jeffrey Hodson. So if anybody wants to look him up and find out about his teachings. And then he says there's a lot of work done by the Gnostic churches, which really involves a representation of the divine feminine.
Sure. Through Sophia, which is the intelligence principle, which is that which can respond to the higher levels. And, you know, we've gotten into that in when we went through the subsection on the Gnostics, and we touched in on Sophia. Yeah, and she certainly would be an aspect of this divine feminine. It's the upliftment of substance, of the substantive realms, You could say that's the purpose of our incarnations, to all the little beings that participate in our threefold sheaths, the physical, astral, mental sheaths. Those are uplifted by cohering as a unity that is called our personality. And that's the great service we do just by reincarnating. I know at some point DK says, well, if you don't do it for yourself, just think of the poor little, beings who make up your form. Do it for them. He's talking about walking the path, right? Because it's the means by which the lowest two kingdoms, the seventh and the sixth hierarchies, not kingdoms, but hierarchies, are uplifted, because every hierarchy uplifts the one beneath them through participation with that hierarchy, right? So, and the whole thing together, all those hierarchies are substantive. They're third aspect all the way up. And so you could say they're the seven veils of Isis, those hierarchies, and different stages of tenuity, of substance. And at some point it becomes impregnated with intelligence and then with wisdom. Okay, anyone else?
Yes, Magda says, if disentangling the material body from the material vehicle refers to the Antakarana body of light, and if it indicates receiving the new name allows numerous souls to receive spiritual enlightenment. She says, is it correct to say that the pyramid equals cosmic hierophant, dweller of the threshold, which manifests itself in time to bring forth the evolution of man?
Well, that's really beautifully written. Yeah, there's, because it's prototypical, the pyramid, it's a prototype of this duality that lifts the substantive realm towards the spirit. I mean, just think of just a simple geometry. It sits on a square, right? The number 4, that's the number of the form aspect. But as soon as you move up into the form itself, you have the 4 merging with the number 3, which is the sides of the pyramid are triple. So you're engaging with the spirit aspect, right? And the chambers that sit within this graduate from that which sits actually below the surface. You could call that like the physical permanent atom or pure dense form, which could represent anyone who walks into that pyramid. But then it ascends through the various passageways into the Queen's chamber, which can represent both the astral and the Buddhic nature or the link between them. And then finally into the King's chamber, which is going to be the higher aspects of the human mind, especially the head center, right? But all this time, the 3 are moving towards the very top of the pyramid, which is a single point, right? When present through the pyramidion, right? And so you could say that the pyramid is being drawn up from the form aspect, or the number 4 of its base, through the agency of threeness to that point of unity, which is pure spirit. You could, that could represent the monad, for instance, right? So when you have such and there's other aspects about it, like for instance that it, as I mentioned in the introduction, that it squares the circle, that gives you a balance between form and spirit. The height of the pyramid is the radius of a circle that is the same in length of the circumference of the circle as the 4 sides. And so what that does is there's this philosophical concept of squaring the circle. And so you could say the entire pyramid in its movement from forness or form aspect via the three agencies of spirit, Atma, Buddhi, Manas, or the three principles, the three rays, however you want to look at it, draws one up ever towards that point of unity. Of course, you know, it's an ongoing process, you know, even once you become a cosmic unity, you're still moving towards that point in the center of the circle, right? So I think that has tremendous magical potency, such a structure. And because of that, it would have been a very effective chamber of initiation, especially for those schooled in the process, right? Yeah, who knows what that was, you know? I mean, we read these fanciful and, you know, interesting. I wouldn't have included them if they weren't, you know, scenarios for initiation, but who knows what they did way back then, you know, and what the process was, you know. But whatever it was, it would have followed in specific ways the general movement from form to spirit, in whatever way that would be seen as effective at that in those times. Anyone else?
Jerry has posted the passage. It was from, I think he said Esoteric Healing. Yeah, Esoteric Healing, page 362 to 363. You want me to go ahead and read it to you? It's not that long.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
The concentration of the feminine force in nature in some individual in female form, who is then called the World Mother. Such an individual has never existed in our particular planetary life, though the avatars of a previous solar system expressing itself through planetary life always took this form,
Wow.
but not in this solar system. The
Wow.
tradition of such appearance is purely symbolic, inherited from the previous solar system, from which we inherited the matter of which all manifested forms
Oh,
are
that makes
made.
sense. That makes perfect sense.
The symbolism has come down from the far off period of the matriarchate, which has a religion that recalled the ancient ways of the earlier system, and in which period of time Lilith symbolized the world mother until Eve took her place.
Wow. Well, thanks for that. Yeah, it's really interesting. Lilith, I think, was was worshipped in the fourth root race, right? Atlantean times. She was. It was one of the goddesses of that period. But you know, this he sends it back even further, you know, to the previous solar system, and it makes sense, you know, that the development, the coordination, and of the form aspect would have been the goal, and therefore it would have been personified by various goddesses, you know, and avatars to help that come into being. I could see how it would have been feminine avatars who would have incarnated to inspire the coordination of the physical vehicle. It's, you know, extraordinary. But yeah, now it's about purification so that it becomes transparent to the second aspect, or the soul aspect, so that one can participate in the soul aspect. Again, I'll point to the moon as the esoteric ruler of Virgo, you know, veiling Vulcan. That really says what the whole concept of the virgin, quote unquote, is about now, right? Thanks for that. I really enjoyed hearing that. Okay, anyone else? Shall we move on?
Magda says, thank you. So pyramid is the ancient knowledge version of what in the new era of Aquarius will be the new way of initiation, Paul's fashion, thanks to return of the Christ.
Well, let's hope so. You know, he says that the first initiation will be exoteric. It will take place even in the church. I guess Masonry in the church, I think he mentions, you know, that the first initiation will be possible. Whereas in ancient times, of course, it was not at all available to the general public. And it was available through the Eleusinian mysteries, the Samothracian mysteries, of course, other mystery schools throughout. It seems to have really concentrated around the Mediterranean. And then, of course, all of that had its source in the mythology of Egypt and in the initiatory rites of Egypt. Then you had these other schools, you know, like the Druids and the Celts, as well as followers of Udan in Scandinavia, you know, that had their own mystery schools. Okay. Okay, so next up, I'm she who separated the heaven from the earth. I read that one. Next, I have pointed out their paths to the stars. Is this where we were? I think so. Oh no, I read that one too. Yeah, we were talking about, oh yeah, this is where we were. So this statement references the ageless wisdom, another aspect of Isis. Hence, HPB's book title, Isis Unveiled. We get that far. G.R.S. Mead says, right, and I just read that. That's where we stopped for this long discussion. This is worth reading again. This was the famous veil of Isis that no mortal, quote unquote, had raised, for that veil was the spiritual vesture of the man himself. And to raise it, he had to transcend the limits of individuality. That's what Theosophists call decentralization. Break the bonds of death and so become immortal. So you're looking again at third, fourth initiation stuff here. But hey, no time like the present to start. Next, I've invented seamanship. So among Isis's attributes is mastery of the sea, of course, since she's, the waters of substance and the sea are a metaphor for each other, right? From which she rose in Apuleius's vision of her. But a deeper meaning comes to the visionary words, quote, she appears to float upon the surface of many waters. Water is the element associated with the substantive aspect and thus with the Divine Mother. Its many waters are the seven subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, which we talked about earlier. Next, I have brought together men and women, and I have caused men to love women. Not a surprising attribute, since procreation lies at the very root of manifestation and diversification, which she overshadows, of the two becoming the many. Next, I have instructed mankind in the mysteries. I have taught reverence of the divine statues. I have established the temple precincts. This is allied with her proclamation, I have caused truth to be considered beautiful. All this points to the pinnacle of the substantive aspect, intelligence as the bridge to wisdom. It is in this role that Isis is the keeper of the ageless wisdom under the tutelage of Hermes, which is represented by Isis' veil, right? A kind of ring past knot, beautifully illustrated by Nicholas Roerich's painting entitled The Mother of the World. Next, I have overthrown the dominion of the tyrants. The dominion of the tyrants is the chaos of purposelessness, unprincipled world, and is thus allied with her proclamation, I gave mankind their laws, and I have made justice more powerful than silver and gold. Next, the face and form of Isis were covered with a veil of scarlet cloth, symbolic of ignorance and emotionalism, which forever stand between man and truth. More esoterically, the veil stands for that which separates the three worlds of human endeavor from the soul realm, that which is the product of fire by friction from those planes ruled by solar fire. At a even higher level of demarcation, it represents the ring past naught guarded by the Lapika lords, which separates pure spirit from the form aspect. Next, Isis lifts her veil and discovers herself to be true and wise, the true and wise investigator who unselfishly, humbly, and earnestly seeks to understand the mysteries which surround him in the universe. No, I'm sorry. Lister Veil discovers herself to the true and wise investigator. Okay, again, from a more occult perspective, Isis's veil is progressively lifted through a series of initiations and through the power of the intuition. Next, those to whom she reveals herself are warned to remain silent concerning the mysteries which they have seen. The great admonition of the wise men was, if thou know it, be silent. The fundamental initiatory vow requires silence about all that occurs at and is bestowed by an initiation. But silence also represents, quote, the transmutation of the lower creative energy into the higher creative life. The sacral center has to relapse into silence. This from A Treatise on White Magic. And finally, to the vulgar and profane, the infidel and disinterested one, she does not uncover her face, for they could not understand the secret processes of the invisible worlds. HPB addresses this topic in, not surprisingly, Isis Unveiled. Could we get a reader, please?
Okay, but first we've got a couple of things going on here. Greg says, what about Nueva Mujer de Guadalupe? Sorry, I'm sure I murdered that. Other possible Virgin Mother appearances over the course of the last 1,000 years, and the apparition of the Virgin, like Guadalupe in the Ciudad de Mexico.
Yeah, that, it's a really good question. What's real, and what is you could say a projection based on someone's strong belief, and then along that line, you have the form coalesces around one's expectations and belief. Right now, what's the true form of something like the Virgin of Guadalupe, who appeared in Mexico? And, I'm sure these visions are real. They really happen. What's her true identity or true nature? It's, who can know? But for that person who had the vision, she was what he expected, that is to say, he was conditioned by his belief system, which was in the Virgin Mary, right? Who was, especially in Mexican and South American churches, a strong emphasis in many other places around the world, even sometimes more than Jesus, Jesus is sort of her son, but the real emphasis is on the Virgin. And the whole feminine principle. So it's not surprising, to my mind anyway, that a vision would coalesce in the form expected. But that doesn't mean that that's an absolute. Who knows? Yeah, anyone else?
No, so we're ready for a reader, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Kira, can you read that for us, please?
As well as those who lived in the days of the Semitics, our present day philosophers, lift the veil of Isis, for Isis is but the symbol of nature. But they see only her physical forms. The soul within escapes their view, and the Divine Mother has no answer for them. There are anatomists who, uncovering to sight no indwelling spirit, uncovering to sight no indwelling spirit under the layers of muscles, the networks of nerves, or the sinisterous matter which they lift with the point of the scalpel, assert that man has no soul, such as purblind and sophistry as the student who, confining his research to the cold letter of the Kabbalah, dares say it has no vivifying spirit. To see the true man who once inhabited the subject which lies before him on the dissecting table, the surgeon must use other eyes than those of his body. So the glorious truth covered up in the heretic writings of the ancient papyri can be revealed only to him who possesses the faculty of intuition, which, if we call reason the eye of the mind, may be defined as the eye of the soul.
Thank you. This is really vintage HPB scathing commentary, right? Yeah, you're going to see what you have prepared your consciousness to see, right? And that there's such an arrogance in science, sometimes usually unrecognized by them, which is that which can be gained through the senses is it. That's all there is. Even though there's just such overwhelming evidence that there's much more than that going on. But anyway, referencing the mystery of Isis's veil, I'd like to finish this introduction by reading a poem by Friedrich von Schiller, which HPB calls that magnificent poem on the veil of Isis. So I'm going to read this, and then that'll be it for today. The Saitic Isis. I am Isis, mystery of the whole land, mistress of the whole land. I was instructed by Hermes, and with Hermes I invented the writings of the nations in order that not all should write with the same letters. I gave mankind their laws and ordained what no one can alter. I am the eldest daughter of Kronos. I am the wife and sister of the high king, Osiris. This is the same. This is this. Wait a minute here.
Yeah, you read that. We read
Hang on a
that
second.
already.
This is what I want to write. Sorry, guys. I'm reading going, what? Okay, here we go. The Veiled Image at Sais by Friedrich von Schiller. Try that again. A youth, a thirst for knowledge, hot desire, to Sais came, intent to explore the dark and hoarded wisdom of Egyptian priests. Through many a grade of mystery, hurrying on far and more far, still pressed the inquiring soul, and scarce the Hierophant could cool or calm the studious fever of impatient toil. What, he exclaimed, is worth a part of truth? What is my gain unless I gain the whole? Has knowledge then a lesser or a more? Is this thy truth, like sensual gross enjoyment, a sum doled out to each in all degrees, larger or smaller, multiplied or diminished? Is not truth one and indivisible? Take from the harmony a single tone, a single tint, take from the iris bow, and lo, what once was all is nothing, while fails to the lovely whole one tint or tone. Now, While they were thus conversed, they stood within a lonely temple, circle-shaped and still. And as the young man paused, abrupt, his gaze upon a veiled and giant image fell. Amazed, he turned unto his guide. And what beneath the veil stands shrouded yonder? Truth, answered the priest. And do I then for truth strive and alone? And is it now by this thin ceremonial robe that truth is hid? Wherefore? That wherefore with the goddess rests, till I, thus saith the goddess, lift this veil, may it be raised by none of mortal born. He who with guilty and unhallowed hand too soon profanes the holy and forbidden, he, says the goddess, well, he shall see the truth. A rare, strange oracle. And hast thou never lifted the veil? No, nor desired to raise. What? Nor desired? Were I shut out from truth by this slight barrier and command divine? Broke on his speech the guide. Far weightier, son, this airy gauze than thy conjectures deem. Light to the touch, lead heavy to the conscience. The young man, thoughtful, turned him to his home, and the fierce fever of the wish to know robbed night of sleep. Upon his couch he rolled. At midnight rose resolved unto the shrine. Timorously stole the involuntary step, but light the bound that scaled the holy wall, and dauntless was the spring that bore within that circle's solemn dome the daring man. Now halts he where the lifeless silence sleeps, in the embrace of mournful solitude, silence unstirred save by the hollowed echo answering his tread along the mysterious vaults. High from the opening of the dome above came the wan shining of the silver moon, and awful as some pale presiding god, glistening adown the range of vaults obscure, in its long veil concealed the image stood. With an uneasy step he onward passed, already touched with violating hand the holy, and recoiled. A shudder thrilled his limbs. Fire hot and icy cold by turns, and an invisible arm did seem to pluck him back from the deed. O miserable man, what wouldst thou? Thus within the inmost heart murmured the warning whisper. Wilt thou dare the all-hallowed to profane? May mortal born, so spake the oracular word, not lift the veil till I myself shall raise. Yet said it not, the same oracular word. Who lifts the veil, he shall see truth. Behind be what there may, I dare the hazard, I will lift the veil. Loud rang his shouting voice, and I will see. A lengthened echo, mocking, shrilled again. He spoke and raised the veil. And ask ye what unto the gaze was there within revealed? I know not. Pale and senseless, at the foot of the dread statue of Egyptian Isis, the priests beheld him at the dawn of day. But what he saw, what did there befall, his lips disclosed not. Ever from his heart was fled the sweet serenity of life, and the deep anguish dug the early grave. Woe, woe to him. Such were his warning words, answering some curious and impetuous brain. Woe, for she never shall delight him more. Woe, woe to him who treads through guilt to truth. Okay, thanks for staying with me. We went over a little bit here. So Next webinar is the Treatise on Cosmic Fire this coming Friday at the same time as this webinar is. And then after that, I think we are in the Secret Doctrine webinar. And what's the date on that?
That'll be 19 March, and it will be after North America changes to daylight savings time. So it will be 7 p.m. GMT. For those of us here in North America who change to daylight savings time, it will be the same relative time, but it will
Local
be
time.
7 p.m. GMT for those of you in Europe, and that's on the 19th of March. And then the next STOA will be on the 2nd of April at 7 p.m.
Right, after we've made the change. Okay, you all, thanks very much for being here. I enjoyed this session. So we'll see you next time. Be well.
Goodbye, everybody.